Hamas says it will release more hostages as planned in a bid to save the fragile ceasefire deal with Israel. So what happens next in the Middle East? I'm Veronica Dudo. Let's find out.
This is In America Today from the Ticker News Studios in New York City.
Hamas has announced plans to set free 3 more Israeli hostages, reversing an earlier threat to delay their release. The move comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Donald Trump issued stark warnings about the future of the ceasefire agreement. President Trump stated that if all hostages are not released by Saturday at noon, Israel should cancel it and let hell break out. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has also made it clear that Israel will not hesitate to resume military action if Hamas fails to meet the deadline. For more, I'm joined by Josh Haston, a Middle East correspondent for JNS and the co-host of the JNS podcast, Jerusalem Minute. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thank you.
So first, let's begin with what led to Hamas reversing its decision and agreeing to now release more hostages.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen throughout negotiations, throughout the ceasefire, has been playing games back and forth throughout. It's a terrorist organization, and you really can't take what they seriously. We've seen this time and time again. So Hamas said no, they weren't going to release hostages this week. Israel now, of course, in this first phase of the ceasefire deal, in which Hamas agreed to release 33 Israeli hostages in exchange for about Arabs who are in Israeli prisons. And so far, they've released 20 hostages, live hostages, including 5 nationals. And Hamas, at the beginning of the week, again, playing the psychological game, said, no, we're not going to release any of the hostages. And Trump, of course, stated that hell will break loose if, in fact, Hamas does all of the hostages. So we were actually optimistic that by Saturday at noon, per that deadline from the President of the United States, that all of the hostages would in fact be released. Unfortunately, Israel decided that it was not going to go according to the President. It would in fact to accept just several hostages released. So Hamas backed down and said, no, we will in fact release the hostages, all of them, but we will release 3 of those hostages. And Israel said, okay, we're willing to live with that at this point. So another 3 of the hostages, the names have been released at this point, but Hamas, in fact, if everything goes according to plan, will release in hours from now approximately. So we're waiting for a list and the names of those 3 to be determined. Again, it's still a very perilous situation. We don't know who to be, and Israel's preparing at this moment, preparing for the potential Hamas backtrack, and if necessary, Israel's prepared to go back to war if Hamas does not live up to their end of the bargain.
How credible is Hamas's commitment to honoring the ceasefire terms moving forward?
Not credible at all. Again, you're dealing with maniacal terrorization. You saw the way, number one, in which they've starved our hostages. Men released last week and what they were in. They carried out the October 7th massacre, butchering 1,200 Israelis, women, burning babies alive. Be taken for their word? Absolutely not. So they're playing games here. This is psychological warfare since the beginning. They've been now for about 30 years, really, against the state of Israel. So you have to take everything they say with a grain of salt. Who knows up their sleeves? Who knows what they're up to now? The time in which they're supposed to release these people after holding them in the dungeon for the past 15 months. So they cannot be taken for the word until these 3 people are released. All the hostages are released. Israelis, especially the families, are waiting at the edge. Put it very, very mild. Hamas cannot be taken for their word.
How might Israel respond if Hamas does not meet the deadline for further hostage releases?
So Israel's preparing that reality. If it comes, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and a lot of the security cabinet have been meeting today on Thursday in southern Israel, preparing for the eventuality of going back to war. They've been having these meetings, and today actually they were meeting down in Beersheba in southern Israel, preparing for the fact that it is war. Israel has also reinforced their troops, the IDF troops along the southern border with Gaza. In addition to the troop down there protecting our southern border, they've reinforced the troops. They've canceled troop leaves. They've also prepared with reservists on standby in case the ceasefire goes awry and Israel has war. All those preparations are being made. Israel, if this ceasefire breaks down, if those hostages on Saturday, by Sunday, Israel might have to go back to war. In terms of phase two, the negotiations were already supposed to have started last week. According to the Prime Minister's office, those talks are not being held. The Prime Minister today says phase two talks are not being held at all. Israel pulled its representatives back from Qatar. They got Saturday night. They 2 days later. So phase two is in the works at all right now, and then it's preparing perhaps to go back to war in Gaza right now.
Now, we saw that very famous Oval Office meeting in recent days between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. What role is the U.S. playing in mediating this situation, and how significant is President Trump's stance?
Yeah, well, the U.S. they have been throughout, both under the Biden administration and now under the Trump administration. You can see, though, the very different role in terms of President Trump, very, very hands-on. The president issuing the statements, very, very strong. He understands the Middle East. He really does. He understands that strength wins out. When the president and Trump got involved in the negotiations, we saw right away in terms of working out a deal. You can argue in terms of the deal itself, paying a steep price, giving away, turning a lot of those terrorists who are in the Israeli jails. You're talking about 9 terrorists. So, but the Trump administration understands that strength wins out. And when the president opens his in terms of his plan to relocate the Gazans, he said that Gaza right now, he has a whole vision. So the week that the United States and over Gaza and rebuild Gaza, people listen. He had the Jordan and the Oval Office this week, supposed to have the leaders of Egypt also hosting them, and they balked. They didn't come. But he is doing so much for the future of the Middle East. And when he speaks, people listen. That's a huge difference in administration.
Now, of course, as you mentioned, President Trump is meeting with several neighboring countries, Arab leaders, and we're also simultaneously seeing him involved between Russia and Ukraine, still trying to broker some type of peace. You're in Israel on the ground. What is the sentiment there in watching this happen? Maybe is there more hope for the situation between Gaza and, of course, Israel? And then also, what is Iran watching in all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're definitely a lot more up now. We saw what President Trump's first term, moving the embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, recognizing Israel, Golan Heights, the Abraham Accords. And right now, Iran remains the head of the octopus, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Hamas, the Houthis. By the way, this against the state of Israel, that if Israel goes back to war in Gaza, the Houthis said that they would attack the state of Israel. But that being said, Iran is the major threat here. They're an existential threat to Israel and a threat to the Western world. Develop nuclear weapons, and the president's hard approach against Iran, threatening Iran. The president issuing last week strong against Iran, warning that they cannot pursue nuclear weapons. So it's a totally different approach right now. The last administration that was willing to work with Iran and lift those sanctions. Whole new reality right now. Also, by the way, very important to remember, very important to mention, I should say right now, just an hour ago, fire a rocket trying to target Israel, another provocation, another break in there, whether it was Hamas or another one of the terrorist groups. Gaza, the rocket for and a 14-year-old Gazan Muslim in Gaza. So just more proof again. Back to Iran, these are Iranian-funded terrorist organizations. Again, I'm waiting to hear from the human rights groups there in Gaza. When condemnations, when Israel takes necessary defensive measures in Gaza, Israel's condemned time and time again. I'm waiting to hear the condemnations come out, and I'm going to be waiting a long time for that. But a 14-year-old kill, that's breaking news out of Gaza right now. So to answer your question, the octopus, they must be dealt with, and we're very confident in the Oval Office between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump that they will stand side by side in after Iran as they still, till this day, try to pursue nuclear weapons. Iran does not like President Trump. There's no doubt about it. They certainly respect him. And this is the Middle East where strength wins out. And they understand he's a very strong president, and he's not going to tolerate Iran trying to achieve a nuclear weapon.
Josh, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
This is Ticker. We'll be right back.